And Laura, I texted Kim, and so far no public comments yet.
Okay, great.
So we are live and ready. It is all yours.
Okay, all board members are now visible. Very good. It's 5:59 and counting, so just a few more seconds before the official start.
Ron, those emails would come directly to my school district email, correct?
Yep. Yes, they
Okay.
come directly to you. And I'll check the
Okay.
form just in case, but that should be set up
Okay.
that way.
Yep, I'm not seeing anything. Okay.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, so it is now 6 o'clock and I will call the May 12th meeting of the Wenatchee School Board to order and welcome everybody to our Zoom live stream. The first item on our agenda today is our consent agenda, where we have minutes from our April 21st special meeting, our April 28th regular meeting, vouchers, payroll, personnel report, surplus report, and contracts. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda as written.
Great, thank you, Michelle.
Mhm.
Is there a second?
Oh, I'll second. This is Julie.
Great. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion about the consent agenda? Okay, hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. And so I'll signify by saying aye if you are in favor and nay if you are not. Martin? You're muted, Martin. Having trouble.
Aye.
Great. Maria?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I am an aye also. Thank you. And next item on the agenda is citizen comment. And last we just checked in just a moment ago with Kim. We didn't have any citizen comments delivered to us, so I'll assume that's still the case. And next on the agenda, we have special presentations, an update on the pre-K through 12 start and end times. And
I'll kick us off.
okay.
Thank you, Laura. So, and Mark's going to be jumping in here in a moment on the pre-K-12 start and end times. We are going to take a pause before a decision's made. We just want to have a deeper understanding of some of the different issues that the survey has highlighted for us. It did exactly what we wanted it to, were things that we wanted to make sure that we were considering. And Mark will talk to you about a couple of those pieces that are still under consideration. And really it's about how can we make the situation work, because we know a couple of things. We don't want kids on buses for over 2 hours. We know that. We know we need to do a better job of our transportation services and ensuring that our routes are more strategically aligned. But there are a couple other pieces we really want to be more thoughtful about and moving forward. But with that, I'm going to hand it to Mark to talk about a couple of the themes that came out and the work that he's doing with different groups.
Yeah, so just as Paul said, the survey brought to light some questions that we kind of knew going in, but it brought some more detail, I guess, questions to us. So we're just going to take a pause. The thing I think the board needs to make sure they understand is whatever we do that's different, it's going to change people's routines. I mean, it's just the way it is. So we know that. We know it's going to cause people, for some people, it's going to make their lives easier. For some people, it's going to make their lives more difficult. For example, Newberry and Columbia, which start school at 7:50 currently, changing that to 7:45, not a big deal. But our other schools, some of them start at 8, some start at 8:15. So that's a big change for some parents, and we get that. So a couple of the big concerns, I'm not going to go through all of them, but a couple of the big concerns was the early start time for elementary. And again, we get that. Having to have daycare, and how do I have my kids supervised? To me, and to the cabinet, as we talked about this, the issue is if we have what we proposed happen, then, and I'm a parent who has an elementary kid and maybe a secondary kid, I can go to work and my secondary kid can make sure my little one gets on the bus. And then I think we can trust our secondary kids to get on the bus themselves. But if we flip it, if we have secondary go first, that's no longer a possibility, because the secondary kids will get on the bus first and the elementaries will have to wait. So whether you're providing daycare before school or after school, there's going to be an issue. I mean, there is right now. So we get that. We understand that. And we're trying to see if there's a way we can figure that out. One of the questions was, isn't this going to cost more money? And I've talked with Jenny and she assures me it will not. Yes, we'll make double runs, but we will be able to condense some routes. We'll be able to streamline some routes so they're not doing this crisscross thing throughout town. She is convinced it will save us money in the long run. So that's a good thing. And then we have some other issues. Sports is an issue. It's going to cause some problems if we do our proposed. So we're trying to see if we can figure out some solutions for that. There were other things too. But I'd rather answer your questions than have me ramble. So, but as Paul said, we're going to take a pause. We're going to see if we can come up with some solutions to some of these things. And the goal is, I believe, in 2 weeks, when we come back together to give you guys a recommendation.
And feeling pretty good about, 61% of the stakeholders said, yeah, they're in favor of this. But we want to be just as thoughtful as possible and make sure that we've spent the necessary time hearing from all of our voices around the issues that Mark talked about. So with that, board, any other comments?
I have a question. So were there any other points of feedback that you got regarding the schedule on it making families' lives more difficult, other than what you just went through? Were there any other pieces?
So the kids who live within that 1 mile boundary that don't ride the bus, currently parents can drop off both kids at the same time and then go to work. They wouldn't be able to do that with the new schedule. So, I mean, I guess the solution is your secondary student will have to walk to school. If you live outside that boundary, then they can get on the bus. So that kind of solves that problem. But that was another one that was shared. Early start time, feeling like there's a really early start time for the preschoolers. That was also shared. Those are basically the big themes.
Mark, could you kind of, in the 39% that weren't favorable, could you give an order of magnitude as to what caused those people to not be in favor? Just a distribution.
Well, I don't have that in front of me, but the daycare was a biggie, and the early start time was a biggie. Those are the two big ones.
Okay.
I think, and then that extracurricular kind of was right there. If you were kind of looking at in a bubble graph, I think those three were our largest feedback portions.
So that's shortening the extracurricular day. Okay.
Well, the issue without getting into a bunch of details, the problem with the extracurricular is if we have the high school end at 3:25, it causes conflicts with our facilities, and potentially practices would not be able to go quite as long because they'll run out of daylight. They won't have the facility for as long, or we'll have to extend the length of practices so kids will get home later for practices. It also will cause some issues with actual games. For example, football, the freshmen play at 3, varsity plays at 7. We could play at 3, but school's still going when we're having a football game. So that doesn't seem quite right. So we're trying to figure that out. But yeah, I met with Jim Beeson today. We're trying to work through some of those issues. He and I are trying to brainstorm possible solutions. Met with Jenny, see if she has any other solutions. So just trying to, like Paul said, really be thoughtful. I don't think we're going to be able to solve all the problems, but we want to solve as many as we can.
Okay.
What number of, how many stakeholders responded to the survey on the start times?
I think it was 1,800. I'm pulling it up right now, but it was a really nice, I know.
That's
The
great.
response rates were great on both of them. Grading was a little bit more just because it was the first question. And it was kind of in that 1,900. And then the start and end time was in that 1,800, but both outstanding.
I think one question I guess I've had in my mind and have not expressed until now is the uncertainty about what school looks like in the fall. You know, this might be a moot point and a moot exercise, you know, if we're not doing the same schedule, if we're doing half online school and half physical school, alternating schedules, less kids in the building, you know, one day and things like that. So
Yep, and we talked about that too. Hoping that someday we get back to some normalcy, then this will kick in. So yeah, it could be a moot point in September, but at some point in time, it will come into fruition. So we want to make sure we have a good plan.
So Ron behind the scenes is doing some nice piece, just a little bit on the data on the Michelle question. So, or it was kind of the Martin question. Elementary start time was by far the number one piece. And then the athletics was number two. We had over 2,000 respond to the first question, which was grading, and then 1,719 for the start end times.
wow, it's a great turnout.
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, the district will continue to provide before and after school daycare, correct?
Yep,
And all the schools will have access to a site.
yep.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, very good. So we're moving on to an update on our secondary grading.
Yeah, so Mike Lane will be jumping in here in a moment. And again, we had over 2,000 people respond to the survey. The survey on the grading was 79–80% favorable to our A/incomplete for our secondary students. And Mike will get into that piece. So that's where we're moving toward. That's where we're going to go with is that A and incomplete, feeling real comfortable with that. Eastmont has already made that decision to go in that direction. So having a nice partnership across the river with each other is important. And we really feel like this is the most equitable way for our organization, for our students to move forward. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike for details.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So on the grading portion of the survey, we had 1,979 responses. As Paul said, 79% were in support of the approach, 12% were unsure, and then 9% had concerns about the approach. We had 243 comments that were left, and the comments really kind of fell into some big buckets, some themes. The first was folks who left their comments voicing their support for our equitable approach and kind of reinforcing the reasons why they supported it. Conversely, we had folks who would voice or leave their comments voicing their opposition to the approach. The majority of those concerns really hovered around the equity versus fairness aspect of it, that this is not necessarily fair to everybody in this historic time, but we are erring on the side of being equitable rather than being fair at this particular point. There were questions about the application of what this looks like going forward, and what if a student does end up with an incomplete, what does that process look like as far as how they get that learning made up? There were ideas. I know everybody is super busy right now and trying to deal with this crisis on their own. So there were some ideas, some very well articulated ideas that people left in the comments that had actually already kind of been taken off the plate by OSPI. Ideas like pass fail or credit no credit ideas that we've already been told that we are unable to have options for. And then the other big bucket were questions about middle school and elementary school. Clearly we didn't do a very good job making sure everybody knows that this particular process we're talking about is for those high school credit bearing courses. The conversations around middle school and elementary school, they're currently happening. We're met with the elementary principals yesterday and the middle school principals today. Really, the bulk of those discussions are around the feedback that teachers are providing to students and to families currently. And then the kind of the part where we're still trying to figure out how to proceed is with the end of the year report card. As you are aware, elementary and middle school grades that show up on a report card don't carry any sort of credit with them. So that's where the conversations are going. Elementary principals are hosting discussions with their staff currently. Middle school, we had about an hour-long meeting. Ron was in there and had some great ideas. I had some learning and teaching staff with us. We are actually going to come back together as a middle school group tomorrow after having kind of slept on it and fleshed out some of the ideas to kind of get a direction going forward so that the middle school principals can also share with their staff and get their input. We want to be very thoughtful about this as we go forward. As far as next steps, Paul and I have already talked about this. Really, the key for us is communication. Many of those comments spurred from either misconceptions or just not necessarily being clear on what the meaning is. Some of that, quite honestly, is going to be directed for our students, that this is not a time to just check out and somehow expect a free A. Your engagement, your participation, your work is still expected. But also with our families and with our staff, getting them more up to speed so that everybody is kind of in the loop on this. Paul had a great plan, and I'm not going to describe it because it's his plan, but he had the thought about he and I hosting focus groups with groups of stakeholders, whether they be teachers or even students. And so, Paul, I don't know if you want to take that on and describe it a little bit as the next step for this too.
I just think it's a nice iteration of where we're trying to go and really trying to learn from our staff and our students. And we're thinking right now is around, 3 to 4, maybe 5, 10-person focus groups where Mike and I develop a few questions just so they have that foundation of what we're looking for. But quite honestly, it's really about how has this year gone, but more importantly, we're moving into next year, because Laura, you mentioned a piece that's really important. And I think most countries, most states, most conversations on this topic about next year are all centered around some type of hybrid where some kids may be back in school, some kids may be online. So we're trying to work with the frame of what did we learn this year from our staff, from our students, and what does that look like going into next year? Currently, the governor is forming a number of different task force on how to get started, and one of those task force is all around schools. We're really grateful to have Corey Callahar sitting on one of those committees for alternative schools, so he will be a nice connection point for us. But all of the ESD superintendents will also be connected. So Dr. Michelle Price will be communicating out to us around what does that look like? But as I read and as I watch, I'm hearing just a lot of the hybrid type of ideas. When we spoke to some of our local health experts, doctors, directors, administrators, they have great concern about us starting where where all kids are just back in the schools next year and everything's back to normal. I don't know of anybody that I've come in contact with that anybody who believes that. So Laura, you're spot on. So we really want to learn from this year about how this looks like for next year. And that's really the impetus for Mike and I to sit with these groups of educators and students and possibly parents as well, because they are, as many of you have been, teachers, the homeschool teachers for us, and really trying to understand what it's like on the ground. We know what it's like at the district office, but we want to hear from a small group. And then what we want to do, and Ron came up with this idea, after we do those focus groups, another very purposeful survey. And I want to kind of highlight the last survey we just did with those two. Just a brief survey what we're learning is a couple of questions gives us a lot of information. So we really want to continue to build on what we've done. And we've done some really amazing things that I'm super proud of Mike and his team, our teachers and our parents. But I want us to be even more prepared next year. Last time we had 3 days, we're going to have a couple months to figure this piece out. So I want us to be even in a better position as we launch next year. And I don't want to scare anybody that that's what it's going to be, but it's our responsibility. It's my cabinet team's responsibility to make sure that we're ready. And I think one of the ways to make sure we're ready is to listen to those who are on the ground doing this work. So questions for Mike on grading or me?
Yes,
So,
I do. I'm in favor of the recommendations you got, but I looked at the WSD table of what school districts had chosen, and A incomplete appears to be about 10% of the ones they posted and of the larger school districts like us. What kind of got me interested, and in fact, as you talk about extending this, it may even be more, if you have any benchmark ideas as to why other school districts went. And I'm not interested, the only one I'm curious about is, it seemed to be centered on Skagit, Snohomish, and perhaps Island County. People did an A-B incomplete. Mike or you, could you kind of benchmark ourselves against the next closest alternative?
We had talked about that, and where we continued to run up against that, Martin, was on the issue of equity, that the difference between an A and a B might have very little to do with student learning, that it may have a whole lot more to do with circumstances outside the student's control. And that's where we erred on the side of the equity piece. I will say, I don't know that any of us, Paul or I, are thinking that this is the perfect solution going into next year. We currently have 27 school days left of this school year. We've already started looking at what next year is going to entail. And I'm not necessarily proposing that this is how we proceed with next year. We need to get more information from the state, from the governor, about what a sort of hybrid approach might entail. Because clearly it would be a more complex solution on how we grade in that situation than the one that we're currently using.
Okay, well, I'm glad you clarified that, because I think it makes a lot of sense. And then my guess was the AB was an attempt to be reasonably equitable, but to have an incentive for some students to show that they achieved more, or am I wrong?
I would assume that that's probably where they were coming from.
Okay.
We really were committed to being lockstep with Eastmont. We have been in communication with them consistently through this thing, whether it's with grading, whether it's through the graduation piece. We have had frequent communication with them because I think both districts are committed to being consistent, regardless of what side of the river a family lives on, that they're going to have a similar experience and have not necessarily be at a disadvantage on one side than the other.
No, that's fine. As I say, just to confirm, I do agree with what you've done. I was just trying to establish the edges around it.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have a question for Mike and Paul. So we're talking about high school grades right now, but for the parents who had questions regarding elementary and middle school grades, when will we see some recommendations rolling out regarding that for this school year in terms of giving parents direction or students direction on that?
Probably later this week, first part of next week. Again, the grade, it's going to be very difficult for an elementary or a middle school teacher to accurately assign a final grade for the very same reasons that it's difficult for the high school teachers. They just have the added level of accountability at the high school level because credits attached to it. So many of the conversations that we're having are just really around not necessarily assigning a final academic grade for third trimester or second semester, depending on what grade level you are, but really focusing the feedback that we give on the level of engagement that we were able to see, work habits, and any of that kind of ongoing feedback that's currently happening.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, anybody else? Thank you all for your hard work that you've done on this topic. It's a difficult question.
Yeah.
No matter what we do, some people are not going to be happy, and that's always hard. And so we'll probably be hearing more from them at some point, but hopefully moving forward, we can expand the system to be more fine-tuned in terms of addressing individual needs. So thank you. Next on the agenda, we have bid approvals. We got some bids for some doors and hardware with our security upgrade. Is Greg going to be talking about that?
Greg and Mark. Mark, I'm not sure who's kicking this off for us tonight. Greg, are you starting this?
I can take off with it, get it
Okay.
going. As you recall,
Your video, Greg?
Pardon me?
Can we see your video?
Ron, you'll have to put my video up.
There you are.
There you go. Okay. As you recall, we went out a few months ago for security upgrades at the building entrances, which involved a lot of vestibule work. That bid came in about 1.5 million, which we felt was too high. And so we reworked the bid documents, eliminated all the vestibules except for the high school where we kept the vestibule. Took on a lot more of the work ourselves in-house, and then ended up going out for just bids on doors, frames, and the finished hardware for the doors, which included auto openers at each of the schools also. Those bids, as you saw in your packet, not great bid coverage, which was the same case before. But we had two bids for finished hardware, 220,000 with Homey Builders and 248,000 with Keel Security. So those were somewhat complementary. And then for doors, frames, we had one bid at 60,000 from Homey Builders. The architect, DOH Architects, who has been very in tune with this project, has reviewed those bids and recommended we accept them and proceed forward on this.
So this is an action item on our agenda, correct? Yes, it is. Do we have a motion to approve, to accept the recommendation of the architect to contract with Homey Builders for the door frames and hardware?
Yes, I'm willing to propose that we accept both bids for the doors and frames and for the hardware from Homey Builders for the security improvements project.
Great. Is there a second?
Job 1904, if that's our number.
Maria, will second that.
Great. Is there any discussion?
I do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
And one is, with all the disruption, and I now learn that we're doing a lot of the work ourselves. And what, Greg, do you think your finishing timetable will be for getting everything done? Well, actually, I'll ask both questions with our own labor and costs. And how does our cost compare with the 300,000 with sales tax odd for buying the material?
Schedule wise, I'm pretty confident we can get a good chunk of it done by the time school starts. I'll have to let Ron weigh in a little bit on the technology side of it, which we're also handling in-house. I've been hearing some rumblings about supply chain issues, which I'm hoping will be minimal. We've, door plants have been shut down and so forth. So all we can do is proceed and hope for the best there. What was your other question, Martin?
You were doing the labor ourselves. Is that a material amount? I mean, there's 300 and I think it's 280 plus sales tax for the external hardware and work. Our own expenses, roughly order of magnitude, what are they going to be?
We haven't compiled that. I can compile that. The door hardware, the hanging and mounting of the door hardware is included in that. That will be done by the contractor. So that's a good part of it. What we'll be doing is technology will be doing the access system hardware work, and we'll be doing some wall framing, some drywall, high voltage electrical. We'll be installing that, and it's not a large amount at each project. Our high school is probably the largest amount, but we'll work on that along with some of the other maintenance projects we have going for the summer. But I'm fairly confident we can take a big chunk of it out through the summer.
Okay.
I have a question. This is more just regarding the motion. Do we need to include the amount in the motion, Laura, of 280,000 plus Washington sales tax?
Or did you say as presented, Martin? I didn't get you can do that.
We can add the specific amount. Yes, I meant to say as presented, or referring to the document.
Yeah, I think we should probably include that amount just as a technicality.
Okay. All right. Thank you. 280,000 plus sales tax, and we'll amend that motion.
Okay. Who was the second?
It was me. I will second the amended motion.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
Any other discussion? Okay, we'll do this by roll call vote. Maria?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
And I'm also an aye. Motion passes. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Greg and Mark.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay, so now we move on to board communication. This is the time when board members have the opportunity to share any communications they've received since the last board meeting with other board members. Are there any board members that would like to share communication? And Michelle, your picture disappeared. I don't know if that was on purpose or not.
Oh, I don't know why that was. Sorry.
I received an invitation from Erin Tofty at Wenatchee Valley College to be part of the Equity in Education Summit conversation on May 19th. So I don't know if we all received the invitation or if it was just me, because I would love to participate in this, but I don't know if everyone, or if it was just me that received the invitation.
That's a good question. I don't remember that specifically. Anybody else?
No.
Looks like it's you, Maria.
Heck,
No conflict.
and if there's others that would, probably one more, maybe Paul. I don't know if you guys would like to participate in the conversation, or it's on the 19th from 9 to 11, so a week from today, and it's the first year they're doing this. It's ran by Erin Tofty. She is a student something at Wenatchee Valley College. And I could reach out to her and see if there's others interested to forward the invitation.
I'd be open.
Cool.
Yeah, I'd be interested if there isn't another person more worthy. Yep.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you both. Anybody else with board communication?
Laura, I do have the one that we discussed in preparing the agenda for the COVID meetings, that we discussed the fact that we called them hints. In other words, we could give Paul ahead of time a little bit of guidance on what our priorities were, not ask questions to keep it light, but just give him an idea of what might be most important to address at those meetings. So that was a message, procedural and making life better for us.
Yeah, thank you. So the next meeting that we're going to be having is on the 19th. So what I understand Paul would like to have is, if board members have specific areas we are interested in, that we would send by Friday the 15th an email to he and Kim with an idea about what the subject matter is.
Mm-hmm.
So he has a little bit of time to prepare for that. So this is, thank you, Martin, for that reminder. Anyone else? I just wanted to, I have one. I want to say that Martin and I attended the Audit Exit Conference today. And I think you all have received the preliminary draft in your email inboxes. It's big lengthy document, 34 pages, but really the important information, as typical, is contained in 3 or 4 pages really. But I would encourage you all to look through that and ask questions. When the final product comes out, we'll have it on our agenda, could be as early as the 26th of this month. But there are some things within the audit report, and especially if you haven't been through a school audit before, that you might want to ask about before coming to the board meeting, so that we can have a conversation. So just reminder, I think we can call the auditor's office directly. Is that not correct, Paul?
You can.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm going to get the answers from the horse's mouth. Okay, that's all I have. Moving on to superintendent's report.
Thank you, everybody. Just again, grateful for the work and the thoughtfulness that continues to move our organization forward. Just an incredible group of team members, from our parents to our teachers to our support staff, administrators, our board members. Just a real true team effort to continue to move us down this road. In that spirit of teamwork, as Mike alluded to earlier, Eastmont or the Wenatchee School District have been working really hard on graduation as well. Huge kudos to Lance, principal over in Eastmont, Eric, our principal here, for taking the lead. This week, we've come to the decision that this does need to be a virtual graduation. We put out our communication, our joint communication with Eastmont, notifying our communities. I recognize how hard this is for our seniors, that we don't do this lightly. There's been a lot of conversation, and quite honestly, we've leaned into our health experts in this area, from Confluence, the Chelan, Douglas County health offices, really trying to understand what this is and what's the best way for us to move forward with keeping student, parent, faculty, community health as the number one driving force in all of this. And it was clear from the experts, the medical experts in this field, that we need to be doing this virtually. We talked about, I'm telling you, our principals, our students have thought about a number of different ways to try to do this, and we did. Eric and Lance were great champions of our students. I'm so proud of both of the high schools for their engagement with our students. And we brought those to the health experts, and ultimately we came to the decision. They don't make the decisions for us. but the leaders of both school districts felt like this was the safest way for us to move forward. With a virtual graduation. So Wenatchee High School will graduate on June 5th from 8 to 10. Westside High School, June 11th from 7 to 8. In our partnership, Eastmont High School will be graduating on June 5th from 6 to 8. We're going to make it as special as we can, and it's already pretty dang special. Hopefully they're the only COVID-19 graduating class, along with all of our college graduates and the high school graduates across the country and across the world, quite honestly. But I know it's going to disappoint some of our kids and our families. I know that. I know it personally. My nephew just graduated from the Schools of Mines last Thursday, and there was supposed to be a huge family celebration, and none of that happened. We saw a 10-second link on the School of Mines and watched Ian, stand there virtually. So I get it, but I just want to let our students and our families know that incredible amount of thought and time went into this, but health was our driving factor. Board members, any thoughts, comments on that?
Well, I appreciate having a senior myself. I appreciate the thoughtfulness that has gone into this decision-making from both sides of the river and with all the health professionals. So I look forward to us having a virtual graduation in a safe space. And then hopefully, like you said, this will be the only one that we have to do like this, but different times call for different measures. And I know my senior understands that. So, but my thoughts are with folks that are struggling with that. And I hope that, they'll be able to accept and understand that with time. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. I appreciate the collaborative approach that we took to this issue involving healthcare, involving our colleagues across the river, and especially involving students in the conversation. So they had firsthand, knowledge of what went into making the choice, and hopefully participated in advocating for that decision as well. So thanks to all the adults and the kids who participated. Yeah.
That is it for me.
Okay, so now we will enter into executive session. The school board will now recess into executive session for a period of, it says 30 minutes here. Don't know if I believe that, but okay, to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment or review the performance of a staff member pursuant to District Policy 1410 and RCW 42.30.110. This discussion will be closed to the public. The school board is not expected to take final action following the executive session. So, Ron.
Okay, so we'll let people check out here before I kick them out and go from there.
Sounds good.
I am ending the live stream right now.